welcome to my sewing room. We have such a fun and interesting show for you today. My guest will be Becky Gilbert. Becky is an educational consultant for FOF American Sales. Now, the first two things I'm going to share with you are a bonnet and a christening dress. They are embroidered totally by machine. This really sweet bonnet has the embroidery that goes across the crown, and then the little back section also has some embroidery. Now, the christening dress to go with this little bonnet is really fabulous too. I just really want you to have a good look at this. This is embroidered and absolutely fit, just made to go into a museum one day as far as I'm concerned. Look at the absolute magnificent embroidery that goes all the way down the front. And then I'm going to turn this dress just a little bit for you, so you can see these beautiful, beautiful teardrops at the bottom, which are also embroidered. Those are organdy, and the embroidery is on top of it. And the really interesting thing is, I believe the christening dress and the bonnet would probably cost no more than about $75. This dress was made for a First Holy Communion. It was done out of a netting, and the embroidery, the machine embroidery, was done on the netting, and it's absolutely beautiful. I'm just going to try to hold it open here. The pinafore is out of netting, and then the little dress is just out of a batiste underneath it. The lace shaping goes down the front, and just a little bit of delicate machine embroidery. You know, lace shaping and heirloom work does not have to be done on netting or on batiste. This lace shaping and embroidery is done with a denim jacket and a really wonderful denim skirt. A very tailored way to wear lace and lace shaping with a wonderful pin stitch to attach it. This is denim. That's fun, huh? This is a cute little sundress which has been smocked by machine. And if you don't have much time and you love English smocking, it can certainly be done on a machine. It's absolutely beautiful. 2 feet away, nobody will know it's by machine or by hand. Now then, this dress is so pretty with the machine embroidery. This time a little collar is done with pink batiste. The machine embroidery is done inside the heart, and on the skirt there is more machine embroidery. These are what I call happy colors. I think my little granddaughters love happy colors, and I think they would just love this dress with the machine embroidery inside the heart. And the little baby day gown, the little French day gown we're going to be working on today, has the most beautiful just released tucks at the top. This is made out of linen. And if you will look at the bottom, there are some beautiful applique hearts with a little bit of machine embroidery up above it. And these hearts really look as if they're appliqued by hand, and that is what we're going to learn how to do today. Now won't you come along with me over to the technique boards? You are not going to believe how much this machine applique looks exactly like hand. The little French day gown that we have here is made out of a linen, and you can see the pretty released tucks that are all the way across the front, completely plain until you get down here. A little bit of tiny pretty pink machine embroidery. Doesn't this heart look exactly like it was stitched on by hand? And there's several of these hearts across the front. And then what a wonderful way to finish this pretty linen day gown, just to simply have a beautiful pink machine scallop. Now these hearts that look exactly like hand applique are what we're going to talk about now. First of all, trace the hearts across your fabric any way or any direction you want to trace them. And this is the little template. You'll need to cut out a cardboard template in order to trace your hearts. Then put water-soluble stabilizer right on top of the hearts and straight stitch around, attaching the water-soluble stabilizer to the fabric. Then cut out the hearts and clip around the curves. Cut all the way and cut a little hole in the middle of your water-soluble stabilizer. Turn your heart right side out, and then to show you how to get that perfection hand look, I'm going to introduce you to my very special guest today, my friend and business colleague, Becky Gilbert. Becky is educational consultant for FOF American Sales. Becky, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you for having me today. This is such a fun technique, and I love anything that I can get the machine to do that looks like handwork.
I join in on that.
I started by making the cardboard template, and then simply tracing around that template, inside the template, to trace a little heart on the square. Then after I did that, I laid the water-soluble stabilizer over it and stitched around the outline. Now, something that makes curves easier to stitch is anytime you are working with curves, you'll get a nicer curve by shortening the stitch length so that you can manipulate those curves better. Because I didn't want a back stitch on the points, but I needed to secure them, I shortened the stitch length all the way down to 0.5 at both the bottom and the inside point of the heart. After that's straight stitched, then trimming it out, very carefully clipping those curves, and then slitting the water-soluble stabilizer so that it could be turned right side out. Once it's turned and pressed, and be sure when you press on water-soluble stabilizer that you have the steam turned off on your iron, then you take the piece and you can even trim a little more of the stabilizer out from behind so you don't have as much to wash away later. Then I lay it onto the background fabric, which has been sprayed with a spray stabilizer or starch, and it's ready to stitch. What I'm going to use for a stitch is a modified blanket type stitch. You could also, if your machine doesn't have it, you could also use a blind hem stitch, or you could use even a tiny, tiny zigzag. But this particular stitch is stitch number 12. Now, I'm going to play a little trick on the machine because the stitch width as it sets up does not go narrower than 2 millimeters. But I can set the stitch width at 3 millimeters and then light my twin needle key, which means I end up with a maximum needle swing or bite, if you will, of a 1 millimeter stitch bite. And then I set it up to begin my stitching. Needle down does help.
I notice you're using an open toe applique.
I am using an open toe applique foot. The older I get, the easier it is to see with things like this, yes. And then I begin to stitch along, and I just catch just the fold with that little needle swing. And that's what gives it the look of hand look applique.
Now, Becky, I notice you are not using another stabilizer under there.
No.
Okay, it's not necessary.
If my background fabric is very heavily starched, I don't need another one.
Are you using what size needle are you using?
I like a very small needle, a size 70 needle, because I can pick up less fabric with a size 70 needle.
Well, Becky, it really, really looks like hand sewing. Thank you so much for this wonderful technique.
Thank you for having me.
And next we have a technique to sew for your baby. Becky has a detail to share with you today that I really love. And Becky, you and I have talked about so many times on fine children's clothes, details really do make the difference. Becky is going to share with you how to do fine gathering, like the gathering on this delicate little bitty baby day gown, the pretty linen, and then the pretty gathers around the bottom of this sleeve. It's not necessarily easy to do fine gathering on little children's clothes. Beautiful gathering is also really nice when you do it on older children's clothes, such as the sleeve of this adorable pink Nalona gown. And then look at the beautiful gathering around the waist of this particular dress. Absolutely beautiful, very, very different. And Becky, I think that's what you're going to share with us now.
Yes, Martha, that's something that when I first was learning to sew, I learned to gather to lengthen the machine stitch and run 2 rows of gathering. And that works, and that's a nice look. But then I learned a few years later there was kind of a special way to give you that really elegant look. And that was just to slightly change the technique. I still will run 2 rows of gathering stitches. However, before I began, I changed my machine setting to an embroidery tension, which means that the top thread pulls slightly to the bottom. And that lets the bottom thread lie very, very straight, so it's easy to pull when you're ready to do the gathering. But the other change is to, instead of doing a long or a longer stitch length, this top sample is done with a 4 millimeter long stitch length, which is the way I used to do it. I shorten the stitch length to a 2mm stitch length, and with that released upper tension, it's very easy still to pull the bobbin threads, and you get a finer gathering, and it's a really nice look, I think, on the very, very delicate fabrics.
Becky, that is fascinating, and truly this is some of the most beautiful gathering I've ever seen. I bet our viewers are thrilled to learn that, just as I'm thrilled to learn that. Becky, thank you so much for sharing this fabulous fine detail technique with us. And you know, there's so many clever notions that are on the market. People enjoy notions, and I think, you know, my favorite word is what makes something easier or more fun. And we were at a recent trade show, or rather consumer show in Arlington, Texas, and filmed some of these notions to share with you.
We've used corded piping in children's clothing for a decorative trim for years. It's little trim that is set on the edge of sleeves, necklines, to attach yokes, and we use this as a finishing touch and to bring out a color in the dress. Now we can bring out two colors in a dress by taking either pre-made piping that comes in many different colors, or by making our own piping and then whipping this piping. If you are making your own piping, use a stitch length of 3 or 4 so that your stitches are evenly spaced with fairly long stitches. Then to make the whip piping, take 6-strand embroidery floss, divide it into 3 strands. Thread up the 3 strands on a size 7 darner or a size 8 crewel embroidery needle, and put a knot in one end, and then as you whip the piping, go through every other stitch where the piping is stitched. This will make the spacing for the whipped embroidery floss perfectly spaced. I have examples here of a number of different colors to show you what a lovely variety whip piping can be done in. The advantage of whipping your own piping rather than using commercial whip piping is that commercial whip piping only comes in a very few colors, and by making your own you can use any color combinations that match any fabric that you have.
Making one of these beautiful skirts on the doll dress used to just scare me to death. And let me just show you what used to scare me. First of all, this beautiful collar with the shadow work by hand, which certainly could be done by machine if you prefer machine embroidery. A beautiful scalloped collar with the gathered lace. Now come on down and see this beautiful skirt. Double row of scallops. Lace, lace, and then gathered lace edging on the bottom. Well, this kind of a skirt just terrified me. I thought, well, I could never learn to make one of those skirts until I discovered the easy way to make it. Now, I'm going to share the easy way to make this skirt with you. First of all, you trace off the scallops or scallops, whichever one you call them is correct. You trace the scallops all the way around the skirt. And I traced 2 rows, 1 and 2. Now notice that the bottom of this skirt is still just a straight piece of fabric. All right, I put pins to shape the lace scallops on the bottom. Now let me review this miter, because when I have the turnaround points, I'll put a pin at the bottom, a pin at the top, fold the lace back on itself, remove the bottom pin, which goes through 2 layers, and then I pin it again. Now in order to, I go all the way on the top and the bottom, which now it will look like this. You see these little loops that are pulled up right here? That's what I did to make the lace lay down flat, really nice and pretty. All right, I make a lace scallop on the top, a lace scallop on the bottom, and will you notice I still have this plain old piece of fabric on the bottom. This is how this beautiful skirt is created, and I'm doing it one step at a time for you. Now then, I'm going to zigzag or wing needle entredot stitch, but it's okay just to zigzag, the top of the scallop and the top of the scallop. Now on this row, because it will be attached and nothing is going to go below it, I'll then come in and do the zigzag or the wing needle entredot on the bottom. However, I do not zigzag or wing needle entredot the bottom of the skirt, and here's why. I'm going to come in and trim away. This is how we make one of those pretty scallopy bottoms. You come in after you zigzag the top only of this bottom row. You come in, lift that lace back, and simply trim away. And what am I going to do to make the top scallop peekaboo? Well, I'll very carefully go in and trim the fabric from behind. The final thing we do after I have trimmed the bottom of the skirt away is to butt gathered lace up, and I will simply zigzag it to attach it to the bottom of the dress and put a little extra fullness in when you go around those points, and then this beautiful scallop skirt is finished. Now, what do I do with these miter points after I have finished everything else? With a regular needle, just simply go back and zigzag over each one of those miter points. And next I have Beverley Sheldrick, who has some silk ribbon techniques for you. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today my dear friend and business colleague Beverley Sheldrick from New Zealand. Beverley is the author of Colonial Inspirations, and she has literally taught needlework all over the world. Beverley, thank you so much for coming to the show.
It's always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Martha. Now, Martha, today I'm going to show your viewers how to do this little rose that we have here, and then just the little rosebuds that we have here. It's an interesting rose because it gives you one which is, again, is balancing the weight of this bigger rose. So where you've got that situation, it's a very useful one to do. Very simple. Just a straight stitch like this, flat on the ground, then one either side like that, and you must go from one side to the other side. It takes a little bit more ribbon, but otherwise you don't get the balance correct. So you can see how I've gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, just like that. And then I've put a fly stitch around it in the green, just either a stranded or whatever is your favorite. Now, we're just going to go through that again here. You'll see that I've already put in that first straight stitch, and you'll see how when I come to put in that stitch there, that I'm coming right across the bottom like that. So totally covering the bottom of that section there. So then we've put in the second one, and this one has come from here and once more gone right across there like that. So we're ready to do the third one, and again it's this crossing over all the time that we're doing. And then again to the other side we'll do that, and the last one is like that, and then of course like that. If you want to, you can drop these last couple just a wee bit, and you'll notice on the wee sample that I've got here, I have actually dropped them a little bit there rather than having them a little more smugly. And I've done that really just to show how it can look just a wee bit different. So there I am, I've got my fly stitch, and then quite simply like that. Now that's really very simple. It's quite a quick rose to do too, which is helpful. Now over here I've got this very simple little rosebud, probably one of the easiest of all. You can see how I've used the darker colour. I've used the same colour that I had used in that big rose. So my straight stitch there, and again it's really not unlike what we did here. We're changing to a second colour from here and across to here, then here the second one from there to there. Not quite the same need to cross over each other as we did with the rose, and then finally with the fly stitch around it. And I do like to, when I'm putting this fly stitch, I do like to actually put it in the the petal rather than on the outside of it. So we'll just quickly go through that again. We have here our straight stitch in the stronger colour, and then up to one side like that, back to here, underneath, across and down in there like that. And that's the step that we've shown here, across to here, just like that. Just such a pretty little rosebud, and yet it actually works extremely well if you're doing it in 7mm. If you're doing some big roses, this is one that you can do very, very well in that. And you can see with this fly stitch that I've got all ready to do here that I've come up actually in that petal there, and I'm going to put my needle down once more in the petal and like that, and bring it down again like that. Again, if you're doing a bigger one of these, or you want to add just a tad more greenery, you can actually put a second one around like that.
Beverly, what beautiful stitches, and thank you so much for sharing them with us.
That's a pleasure.
And now won't you come along with me to my attic? This is a magnificent batiste tucks and lace dress. The tucks are about 1/4 inch wide, and you can see the lace makes a square yoke with just the gathered lace below the yoke. More tucks, and also beautiful tucks on the sleeves, lace entredeaux. I think this is a really interesting feature. The 1/4 inch release tucks, as you can see, they go all the way around, and this lace is really pretty. It almost just looks like a pillar of lace. You have the entredeaux that goes around the top, and it goes down with more beautiful tucks and a pretty ruffle. And I just have to show you the back of this dress. They're always just as beautiful on the back as they are on the front. As a matter of fact, this dress has as much work, and it's identical on the back as it is on the front. For my Sewing from the Heart today, I have a letter from Mary Dyer from Phoenix, Arizona. At the Quilted Apple in Phoenix, Arizona, we offer a class 4 times a year called One Dress at a Time. The One Dress at a Time project provides a new dress for a child in need through the Volunteer Center of Phoenix. This project was started by a very generous and loving woman, Tony Pugliano. The Quilted Apple offers this one dress class free of charge to anyone who would like to make a dress for a child. We ask that the seamstress supply her own fabric, but if that is not possible, we have fabric that's been donated. The shop provides the pattern, and I teach the class. We have a wonderful day of sharing as we work together on our dresses. Everyone benefits. A child gets a new dress, we learn various sewing techniques, and most of all, we share the joy and companionship that sewing brings. Most ladies finish their dress in class, and those who don't finish in class return with it completed in just a few days. Then we ooh and ah over the whole bunch of dresses and take them over to the Volunteer Center of Phoenix. Most ladies go home and make several more dresses, so actually new dresses continue to be delivered for the children in need year-round. Tony has inspired all of us to participate by helping us see that one dress for one child really does make a difference. Mary Dyer, this is such a sweet letter, and it is so good to know that you ladies out in Phoenix are truly realizing that one dress or even one shirt for a little boy, if it's the case of sewing for a little boy, sometimes one new dress may be the only new dress that child has ever had. Thank you for joining me in my sewing room today, and I really would like to invite you back next time.